Hello, everybody. This is Paul Sims once again. Thank you so much for being on time, ready to go, and really excited you could be with us today. I'm the chairman at eyeforpharma, calling you today from London, as I just mentioned. And today's webinar, as you should be able to see from the top of your screen, is called Bridge the Divide and Inspire Your Customers. And I suppose the reason why we chose that title is because we felt that there was a strong need for companies or departments, should I say, to come together in order to be able to serve customers more holistically, to be able to collaborate internally, harness the various commercial channels that we have available to us, and of course, ideally create partnerships with our customers based on educational principles that go a step beyond just basic communication and well into inspiration. So it's a popular topic. In fact, we have more than 1,500 people signing up for today's session, so we've got a great audience. Thank you so much, everyone. We're going to hopefully have a great discussion. I really want everyone listening in to actually contribute rather than just be a passive listener. And what's very interesting about, I suppose, the popularity of this webinar is it's about a year since we last did a webinar in partnership with QStream, who are working with us today. We actually did a year ago a webinar called The Rep of Tomorrow. That had 1,700 registrants. So clearly QStream very popular. Very pleased to have Michael back, who's going to be doing a few opening slides with us in just a second. But as I say, let's make it an interactive discussion. On the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a Q&A box. Maybe you could just say a quick hello to me in there right now so that I know that you're all listening in and aware of what's going on. And then we'll be able to get things going. So, thank you very much for all the hellos. So customers want to be inspired, they want to learn, they want to feel like they're getting individualized value, not just to their profession, but also, of course, to the field of medicine that they specialize in. So how do we in pharma actually meet that demand? It's very clear that there is a desire to break down the silos. And what you'll see when I introduce each of our speakers in just a second is that pretty much all of our speakers have experience on both the medical as well as the commercial side of the business. And that's obviously utterly critical. Of course, there are other silos. People have cited market access as a very important one that we need to try and remove, but it's absolutely key to figure out ways in which we can work together and provide more integrated and solution-oriented thinking. So let me just go through each of our each of our speakers one by one. So top left, you'll see Heather. Heather is head of medical affairs at Roche. She's a Canadian, but I'm very pleased to say that we Brits have somehow managed to capture her here in the UK. Can't take credit for that, of course, but I only met Heather for the first time myself a couple of months ago at our Barcelona event, where she valiantly joined me in my attempt to have 4 dinners in one night and actually kept pace. So kudos to you, Heather, for managing that. In her usual life, she's pursuing quite a complex and global role requiring cross-functional international collaboration at really every level, so perfect for this webinar. She's coming up to 2 years of Head of Medical Affairs UK. Before that was in scientific communications as a leader for 2.5 years, and she's also been a sales rep at Merck, worked with GSK, and she's been an MSL when she joined Roche 12 years ago and worked her way into management since then, so absolutely perfect for this session. Next is Dirk, just underneath. He's the Global Medical Sales Director at Reckitt Benckiser, or RB. He has been in senior global executive development and really on the front line of what we're talking about today for more than 30 years. He's worked mainly or almost completely in maternal and infant nutrition during that time. But again, he has experience in both the commercial sales and as a medical rep. So he's, despite having medical in his job title, he is also no stranger to Salesforce effectiveness, incentives, CRM, omnichannel, customer engagement, KPIs, all of those juicy things. He's also done some great work in Africa, and of course his crowning glory is his past involvement in several eyeforpharma events as a speaker and a judge. So thank you so much for being with us, Dirk. Next we have Helena. Helena is the head of commercial excellence, but also business transformation at Leo for the international region. Helena started out as a pharmacist, spent 11 years there before joining Pharma, and she did that as a sales rep at AstraZeneca, then at UCB, Lundbeck, and finally Leo, where she has been since 2010. She's now head of commercial excellence and business transformation, and indeed she's actually heading up a project within Leo designed to de-silo departments going forward. And in her own words, we're looking to identify and close the gaps in market experience in the strategy execution process. So once again, perfect for this webinar. Helena has also been on several eyeforpharma agendas in the past because not only is her company Leo a real innovator, but she also has a great talent and hunger for taking on big projects right from concept, and her great experience in meeting customer needs. So thank you so much, Helena. Michael, I mentioned very briefly earlier. He's the Director of Enterprise Sales at QStream, which is a company you should certainly check out if you haven't already done so. And indeed, Michael is an experienced software as a service executive. And for the past 10 years, he's been working with leaders in life sciences companies, helping them address the key challenges. Previously, actually, with a focus on trials and R&D, but nowadays more on the commercial side of the business, with a strong focus on technology solutions. And if for some reason we all run out of steam on this session, you can count on Michael to keep going, as he has endurance sports as one of his key hobbies. I believe he's a marathon runner or even an ultra marathon runner. So he should keep going even if we all keel over. And then last but certainly not least is Kumaran. Kumaran is the Director of European Medical Affairs, and interestingly, medical digital transformation, which actually is as interesting as it sounds. Kumaran actually also started as a pharmacist. Again, he's spending 10 years in pharmacy before joining Pharma, this time actually in India, where he then joined Merck there, and then he came over to the UK to work for Pfizer and then Sanofi, and then he's been at Teva for about 2 years now, drafted in to steady the ship there, and indeed take on the medical digital transformation role. So again, experienced on both medical and commercial side, and kindly has spoken on webinars and conferences with eyeforpharma in the past, increasingly known as a digital expert also. Right, so as you can see, we have a pretty well-qualified group, and I'd love your questions to start rolling in already, if that's possible. So what I'm going to do first, however, is hand over to Michael. So Michael, I'm just going to hand you the microphone, and we're going to see a few slides from you, if that's all right.
Okay, great. You'll bring up my slides for me, Paul, right?
Yep, just doing that now.
Okay, so welcome everybody. I think we have participants over here in Europe on this side of the Atlantic, so good afternoon. Good morning to those of you who are in on the other side of the Atlantic. We do have a very full session today, so I'm not going to talk at all really about QStream, because we've got a great panel of industry experts, people who I like to say they walk in the moccasins of the Indian. What I mean by that is they have experienced the challenges that you all are experiencing, and they're going to share with you today how they are dealing with them in their companies. Paul did mention eyeforpharma in Barcelona. For those of you who were there, it's a great event. Dirk and Heather gave a very, very interesting session there that was very well attended on some of the challenges about bridging gaps, breaking down the silos that I'm sure all of you are familiar with. So I know from that session in Barcelona that today's will be a very lively session and you have lots of questions. So Paul, if you could just go to the other slide, I'm just going to take you two slides very quickly. The purpose of this one is just to share with you the QStream experience of the last couple of years and how we see pharma evolving. 10 years ago, when we first got involved with pharmaceutical companies on the learning and development side and behavior change, we dealt primarily with the sales reps. It was all about helping the sales reps do a better job, focus on the product, stay within compliance. And that's where we started off. And it was the sales reps and the HCPs primarily. The sales reps sold to the HCPs on a fairly transactional model. But what we are seeing now is that as the industry has evolved, as Paul said, last year we ran, our series was around the sales rep of the future. The year before that, it was around the patient-centric model. They are all now coming together in that you're breaking down some of the barriers, and embracing it all is this whole concept of multi-channel marketing. We're in a digital age. It's all about digital. How does digital affect the sales rep? How does it affect the HCP? But most importantly here, we've got the patient in the center. We are, all of us in this industry today, very patient focused. That's what we should all be doing And therefore, we should be breaking down the internal barriers that helps us get on the same page as the patient and give value-added solutions to the patient via the HCP. So that really is where we are today. And I've just got one more slide to show you before I go to the panel. And so what we have here are some of the challenges that we are faced with today. So we've got the patient, we've got the HCP and commercial. We're all very familiar with the patient goes to Dr. Google right away to see what their problem is, then goes to the HCP who's time poor, trying to build up trust with the patient. And the HCP is expected to have all the answers that the patient has picked up on Dr. Google. So the HCP in turn is going to look to the pharma sales rep or the MSL, whoever it is. So there is more of a burden today on the commercial model to be more value add in the kind of conversations they have with the HCPs, so that the HCPs then are empowered to deal with the patient. So that's how we see the challenges today, and that's what we're going to talk about with our panel. So I'll hand it back over to you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Michael, and I appreciate you just setting the scene for us there. What I'd like to do just before we invite everybody else to the conversation is to get you, the audience, awake and interacting with us. So if you look at your screen right now, you will see that it's changed. So it's changing into a poll question. What do you believe is the greatest barrier towards understanding customer mindset in your organization? And I've given you 5 options. You can only choose one, I'm afraid. I'm not very nice like that. Of course, if you are speaking from a non-pharma company, then please do try and consider your pharma clients or pharma friends when you answer this. So choose one of the following. Is it down to poor cross-company coordination between different departments? And obviously the siloing that comes with that. Is it down to a lack of curiosity culture or desire to gather insights so that people don't feel that's critical in their everyday business? Is it down to reps and MSLs not engaging or listening? In other words, they have a product or a messaging focus. It's very much a push culture still. Is it because of data and data's siloing and the poor analysis or communication of that data? Or finally, is it down to incentives and KPIs, targets, not pushing our workforce in a direction towards better customer understanding and learning? So I can see that about half of you have voted so far. I'm going to hold that open another 3 seconds, and then we will see the results. So 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's have a look. Thank you, everybody, for your votes. Okay, and as I say, we have a very good audience size. So this is a pretty big data set that we're getting a representation from. And actually, it's relatively even, I would say, on these results, wouldn't you? It's roughly a quarter, well, between a quarter and 13% for everything. So I guess that probably just means there's a lot of barriers. Anyway, I'm going to unmute all of our speakers right now and invite them in to talk about these results, and also, based on what Michael said at the beginning, what they personally believe is absolutely critical to making this happen within their organization. So Heather, since you're top left, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, Paul, thank you. So I'd like to speak so I'm working in the UK business right now, where we have amazing MSLs, but we're challenging them with looking at different skill sets. So I think there's almost some, what would have been considered in the past, sales skill sets about that curiosity culture result that you've shown here, that we need to inspire our MSLs to use more as well. And to really be clear, they're not sales tactics, they're not promotional tactics, but they're conversational tactics, where you're not just talking about data for that one specific question, but you're being curious, you're asking why, and tell me more about, that problem, so that we can get the right insights, the deeper level insights from our customers, to be able to feed that back to the business and solve bigger problems than just that single data request, for example. So I think the curiosity culture is really important to get the right kind of insights, and that's both from sales and from MSLs that are of value to a cross-functional team in the office. So I'd like to really give a shout out to that and the new challenges of training that we're doing for MSLs now, and to make sure that they can embrace that and really say, no, it's not a sales technique, but it's a way that everyone can do a better business.
And changing culture, Heather, is not the easiest thing to do. So have you got a word to say on that?
Absolutely. I think in terms of culture, it goes right from our structure, but actually mainly to mindset. So we have to shake off some of the maybe protective behaviors in the past, or where we put up silos internally, to now really going to solve real customer problems. We have to work together. So I think a lot of that has to do with mindset and shaking off our habits of the past, or what was an easy way to do our business of the past. And to be more innovative, we'll have to work together more in the future, and that requires a big culture change. And we talk about being agile. It's not just trying to work faster or smarter, but taking away our own barriers we put up with SOPs and things that people have depended on to make their jobs straightforward in the past, where now it's a much more blended approach, where we have to just strip away all of the silos to move forward and solve the customer problems.
Thank you. Thank you. I should just, by the way, say that all of the comments on today's webinar don't reflect the beliefs necessarily of the companies that everybody represents. So people are talking here as individuals as opposed to representing the company. But anyway, who else wants to comment on what we've just
if I might, Helena here, if I might continue on with the blended approach, Heather, that you just mentioned. And before we went live on this webinar, we were also discussing that one of the overarching reasons why this might happen is also that we might not have the same goal at a company when it comes to what do we want to achieve with those customers, those segments, etc. So one of the reasons might be if we start to look, do we all have the same understanding what the goals are? Then of course the KPIs and incentives differ because of what we are supposed to deliver. But start with that one. I don't know if any one of the others would like to repeat what we were discussing before.
No, I fully agree. It's Dirk here. So if you look even at the 5 buckets, as Paul said, they're quite evenly spread out. But I agree with what just has been said. First of all, the goal has to be the same. How we get there, that's another kind of exercise. That's a cross-functional approach anyhow. But also I would like to reiterate point 2 and 3. A lack of curiosity, and then the role of the reps and the MSLs, because for me they are going together. I believe that as an organization we should first start getting to the right insights, and not always through third parties, but using our own medical sales teams, being it the science liaisons, being it the sales reps, to really through a structured, unbiased survey to get to understand what is it our customers are expecting from us. What are the challenges they are facing and have to overcome when they deal with their patients? And automatically that will force us to have a better cross-company coordination, will help us in having the right data models behind, and also to skew our intensive and KPIs in the right direction. So already there, if you look at it from that angle, I think the organization will have to change, but the first point that has to happen from the C-suite down to the sales rep is really to re-embrace again, why are we there? It's to give service, it's to service the patients and the customers.
And an important part of this is also, as we have been talking about earlier, is the communication as such. I think that many companies are rather good at communicating top down, but sometimes when we reverse that, the bottom up communication is stopping or being blocked on certain levels, might be on a sales rep or sales medical level. So I think that that is also something that might prohibit a real cross-functional work instead of causing those silos.
I think there's another element of what we're incentivizing people though, and what insights we're collecting from that, because if we're setting goals sort of from top down for people to communicate X messages X number of times, that's what our people will do. But if you're setting goals sort of from the C-suite to have an excellent customer experience, or change the net promoter score for the company, or adding patient number impact, that will inspire a different set of behaviors than they've had in the past as well, and will inspire the right kind of insights collection because there's a reason why you're collecting that information. You can make something of it. You can make a decision based on the insights to reach that bigger goal of customer experience or patient numbers or patient impact. So I think the way we're incentivizing people will drive behavior, and that's one of the first things we can change to make collaborative goals that really meet real value instead of these really lower level goals that will just drive simple activity-based behaviors.
Yeah, and not necessarily adding the impact on a customer and patient level.
Okay, do Kumar and Michael want to come in on this one, or shall I move to the next question? Silence, so I hope they're still here. We're getting some good audience questions, so please do keep those rolling in, and I will come to those in just a second. For the time being, I'm going to throw another question your way, if that's all right. So have a look at your screen. There's a brand new question. How well do you currently believe you know and understand your customers? So I really want to try and take a litmus test of where everybody actually is today on this front, and how well they believe they're actually doing. So again, 5 perhaps quite simple questions to answer here. Again, you can only choose one. Do you believe that it's extremely well? You really understand the what and the why of behaviors. You feel that you get a 360-degree view of your customers currently. Do you say well, but with an emphasis on the data side of things, with trackable events, quantifiable events, or perhaps the opposite, well, with an emphasis on attitudes and perceptions, perhaps the qualitative side of things? And then the fourth option is only at the individual rep and MSL level. In other words, it's captured, but it's not communicated very well. And then finally, do you believe that your knowledge, even at that level, is very poor generally from where it needs to be? So let's hold that open. Once again, I've got the alert half of the audience who has voted already, so I'll hold it open for 3 more seconds. So 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much, everyone. Let's have a look at the results. Okay, so this one is a little bit more of a normal distribution, shall we say. We've got 8% on extremely well, but up to nearly a third on the next 3. So we're there, and then only 4% of people saying not at all. So this is obviously not new. We've been trying to understand our customers. We've been trying to segment this for certainly the 16 years that I've been in this industry. We've certainly been trying very hard, and you know, we're not there yet. So what's the reason for that? What's the reason why we can't make any progress there from what we need to do? Let me invite the panel once again to comment. Whoever wants to go first.
Oh, I'd love to hear from Kumar. Yeah, I just saw he was muted here, because I wonder if there's some technologies that we can use to help get that right understanding and actually connect it to the business. So I think Kumar would be great to hear from for this one.
Yeah, guys, looks like I have been muted. So basically, you know, I'm back online now. So if you're looking at, I'm going to answer this, take this question and try to give my perspective. How well do we currently believe what we know and understand our customers? I'm really not surprised by the results that are shown. You know, again, perceptions, attitudes, etc., are extremely important. I often say that it is not what the title of the in the business card that you carry. It's all about your behavior. You know, a person from a commercial organization could go into a customer's office and can be absolutely credible. But at the same time, if a medical organization, if somebody from an MSL or a medical organization goes in and asks for business, that is actually construed as selling a product. So it is all about attitudes, perceptions, etc., etc.
Okay, anyone else?
I mean, I think that we need to look at the different levels of understanding, and then it's the concurrence between them that will give us a full picture, because we only look at, say, individual interactions, that will only tell us so much. So I think if you look at sort of an individual interaction level of gaining insights, an account level way of gaining insights and finding out that account agenda, or if you look at a community-based type way of getting insights, you get a bigger picture. And with both qualitative and quantitative insights, then you can check your assumptions. You can check any biases that you may have had in your insights collection methodology. And I think it's the mix of all of these things that you've asked here about trackable metrics, attitudes and perception research on a population base, as well as individual anecdotal insights that can give the picture that we need to find out, you know, how to add the best value. So I'm not sure. I think a lot of commercial functions really do this more naturally and participate in market research as well as sort of individual surveys. And I think it's something we can encourage medical teams to do more, or say cross-functional teams to do more, to get multiple layers of insights to check the depth of our understanding and check our biases as to what we're doing and what the impact is.
I couldn't agree more with the last point you just made, because it's related also to the first series of questions we started with today. It's the right insights, but more importantly, if you look, the commercial teams, they're all using a CRM system. How much data is sitting in there? And if you ask in your own organization already, who is accessing this information from medical, from marketing, the brands, etc., it's astonishing to see how little this information is used. So that's why when I see the result here, I'm even a bit surprised that it is quite high, the understanding of what our customers want and that we really understand. So the reason why I'm saying that is I truly believe when I discuss during meetings like eyeforpharma with colleagues, it's still often too internally focused, related to what we want to sell, and then try to match it with some of the expectations of customers without going beyond even to see it in a broader perspective, which would allow us to come with a lot better value proposition together with other companies. That's my take when I see this.
And also what you have been talking about is that, yes, sales or the commercial organizations might have more insights, and we should use Viva more. We have done some attempts here at our company to see how we can show the value and benefits by introducing the findings in CRM system to finance department, to medical, and to marketing. And we have seen a higher wish for information, and also for them to be able to push what they want to see. But we also have a different another point, and that is that I have my customers. Those are my HCPs, while medical might think that, okay, the key opinion leaders, they are my customers. So there is also this kind of willingness to share information, not only that it's scattered and siloed, but also the willingness to share this information.
Yeah. I cannot agree with you. So Skuren here, I cannot agree with this statement more, because the one culture that we want to drive within the organization is nobody owns the customer. The customer is part of the organization. So that sort of protective behavior should be discouraged. And also what we see here is more and more of pre-launch activity. Even if you go into the pre-launch phase, pre-license phase, there is a lot of emphasis and activities going on in terms of measuring customer share of voice, and also net promoter score, so on and so forth. From that point of view, again, there has to be that sort of seamless sharing of information between the division, the departments, of course, within the rules of compliance and having a compliant behavior. That has to be encouraged.
Yeah,
absolutely. I agree as well. And to go back to that incentive thing, so why would somebody say this is my customer? If they're targeted on a certain number of interactions or something with that customer, they'll feel more protective of the customer and the time with that customer, and maybe feel threatened by another function, you know, interacting with that customer that could take away from those personal goals. But that's, again, if you strip away that sort of smaller level of goal for the customer, it doesn't matter who owns the customer, because you're going for a better impact or outcome. You know, if we're talking about inspiring the customer, they don't care how many times we've talked to them. You know, they want their problem solved. And could we be brave enough to actually go even higher than that, that customer is not at any one function, or maybe not even any one company, that if we're acting as brokers to solve the customer's problems, then maybe we help them, reach out to other collaborators if the problem's not aligned to what our company can offer for solutions. So we're really having a customer focus versus something that our company or any one individual in the company can own. So we can strip away the behavior of owning. And that goes to say for patients as well, if functions say, well, I own patient relationships. I don't think that's true. I think that's something that everyone, can participate in the same way. But it's some of the old-fashioned metrics or drivers we've put in place that maybe have caused some of that ownership behavior.
Yeah, it's an interesting venue that you were opening before. It's related to this data, and when I was listening also to Kumaran, I was wondering why still in our own organization we are not sharing already all the data between the different teams, and because we have CRM system, we have so many technology behind where we easily could do that. So that's the first observation I would like to share. The second one, based on what you just mentioned at the end, are we willing to start sharing data related to patients and HCPs across industry to serve this bigger kind of purpose you just depicted, within, of course, compliance and data privacy and so on and so forth? So an interesting question to all of you too.
So again, if you look at if you look at the way the CRMs are being built, if you take markets like America, which is completely different to the European market, the European CRM is built on a country basis, right? If you take many organizations across the industry, CRMs belong to each of the countries. It's, for example, the UK CRM sits in the UK server, and so is Germany, and so is France, etc. We have isolated, or what I would call an island of CRMs. The problem is, how do we connect all these dots together for people sitting in the European and global function to have that sort of 360-degree view of our customer activity and also of the insights that's coming through. And this is a constant question that I keep pushing organizations that are selling CRM solutions to see how can you effectively build this coherent insight collection and break the silos within countries, of course, within the GDPR and compliance rules as well.
Kumaran, I might make your day. That is already possible. We are creating those kind of reports.
That's great to hear.
Can you explain more? Can you explain more?
Yeah, I don't know how much I can mention CRM company, but the CRM system that we are using, I mean, a guy in my team, he's making those kind of reports where we look into the regional data and see where we are. So it is possible.
Yeah, I agree. It's the same at our side. And I think it depends a bit on the kind of core you are developing, if it is coming from global and then it's trickling down to regional and local, or is it the opposite way around? And are you having one CRM across the globe, or are you having many CRMs? So, but I think technology at the end is there to help us. And I'm sure that also Michael from QStream, he could say a lot of things about this. I think it all starts with willingness, and even within one country, we could already break a lot of boundaries.
Okay, guys, this is a good conversation. Sorry, I'm just going to have to interrupt because firstly, I want to apologize. It sort of sounds like someone else's conversation is somehow leaking into our conversation sometimes. So apologies for the audio glitches that you've been hearing. I have no idea how to stop them. I'm very sorry about that. I do just want to hold that thought. But I do just want to read out a few audience questions. We've had quite a few audience questions, and I feel like we'd be neglecting our lovely audience if I didn't at least read out a few. Going from obviously a few minutes ago, how does Leo currently ensure the free flow of bottom-up communication? That's from Pauline. Is the understanding more due to company culture and direction that the CAM or MSL is given? What truly is the value proposition for patients, for patient engagement? We assume they want to be engaged, but that just puts more responsibility in their hands when they actually prefer more proactive or hands-on support. Understanding customers depends on who the customer is. do we define well whether that's the HCP or the patient? That probably alludes to the previous question as well. A comment to Dirk was when you were talking earlier that what you were saying was this is where a true cross-functional account management system is actually pivotal for success, and indeed that's what we need. A comment from Nutan says, how much do we actually use the patient feedback or patient satisfaction index data to improve the patient's experience with the product? So lots of people wanting us to focus on patients here. There's a few more questions, but I think I'll leave it there just for the moment and come back to some of the more of them in a few minutes' time, as otherwise it'll be too many. So does anyone want to address anything they've just heard?
Hi, it's Simran here. I can talk about the value proposition for the patients itself. The digital technology has allowed us to behave in a certain way, of course, within compliance reasons, to reach out to patients directly when it comes to helping the way they manage diseases. For example, in Europe, it's forbidden to go and promote to patients, so direct to consumers is prohibited. But what we can do is to help our patients manage their disease better, whether it's asthma or diabetes or so on and so forth. There are a number of portals you could see from the industry where patients talk to their fellow patients in a very sort of a bloggy way, and the industry is helping that sort of blogs without provide a bit of a framework for those blogs so that patients can help each other. That's where I think the value comes from, not from directly saying you take this medication, you feel better, or so on and so forth. How do we manage our chronic illnesses in a better way, learning from the fellow patients? That's where the pharma industry is proud of in helping the patients, and that's where we derive the value as well.
I would like to use what you just mentioned to talk about this other point that has been mentioned by Paul and coming from the audience, the cross-functional key account management. Because patients, they have to go somewhere to get the diagnosis done and then the therapy started and the follow-up. So how do we work together with healthcare institutions, the healthcare environment, in helping them also better understand what patients are looking for, what the role is of the institution, what the role is of the HCPs, and the role of us as a commercial organization. And I think what we also have to learn from that is, if we really want to be cross-functional, focusing on key accounts, is that we have this, what I like to call cross-functional ad hoc committees, depending on the dossier, depending on the program, depending on the need from a healthcare entity, sitting around the table with supply chain, with commercial, with marketing, with medical, for example, to really tailor-made our solution to meet the needs with this hospital and to come to a mutual agreement that this is a plan which is suitable for them, is helping them to achieve their goals, their patient outcomes, and our goals as an organization. But this is easy to say. It really requires a whole change in mindset of the organization.
I agree. I think if you're the combination of both of those, I mean, if we want to keep the patient centricity on the agenda, it doesn't mean we're directly communicating with them, but we're making sure we understand their agenda, their whole journey. And if we're treating them as the end user, as a customer, we look at every aspect of their journey through healthcare systems, physical, emotional, et cetera, and see where we have interventions that make their lives better to meet those goals. And in that way, we're having a higher level impact. And that relates to then how we're actually sharing the information of that patient agenda or the customer agenda as an HCP or the hospital or account agenda, in looking at each of those levels of that customer journey and including the patient defined as a customer, and how are we making that smooth sort of customer experience, including patients. And that doesn't mean we're going against compliance, and promoting to patients, but we're looking for easier, better outcomes for them. So I think you can achieve all of those goals by keeping the patient agenda in mind.
Okay, I want to move to another audience question, if that's all right. We are getting through the time here. So take a look at your screen. Truthfully, This is all anonymous, don't worry. Truthfully, how well do you feel Pharma's goals are aligned with HCP's goals? Yes, I'm sorry, we're going back to HCP's. But how well do you really feel that the industry's goals are aligned? And we're just going to do this one very quickly and then move on to the next one. So is it already very well aligned based on the insights that you have? You feel that we're heading in already the same direction? Okay, but Pharma has a poor focus on holistic patient need. That's obviously something we've just talked about, so misaligned there. Okay, but Pharma has poor focus on HCP need, misaligned there. Or do you say poorly aligned yet convergent? We are actually moving together, but today we're not in a great place. Or poorly aligned and divergent. Actually, we're moving away from one another in terms of our alignment with HCP goals. So, you know, I'll ask this question just to sort of take a little temperature gauge as to whether or not we actually feel like this alignment is going to be natural or not. So once again, got about half of you voted. So 3 more seconds, get your votes in. 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much, everybody. Let's have a look at the results. Okay, so 6% already very well aligned. That's actually possibly lower than I hoped to see. Okay, but Pharma has a poor focus on holistic patient needs, so I think we were very right to bring in the patient requirements into the conversation just a moment ago. Interestingly, nearly 20% say poor focus on HCP needs, which of course is where we traditionally have focused as an industry. And then poorly aligned yet convergent, so some optimistic people, and 7% of people believe that it is actually moving in the wrong direction. Hopefully a minority will stay a minority. So interested to hear your comments on that in a moment, but what I'm actually going to do, I think, is actually move on to another question. We can actually talk about both of these questions when we come back to our panel. So have a look at your screen once again. Where do you believe our focus should be when serving HCPs? So we've obviously talked about inspiration being at the top of this, the title of this webinar, but is that actually where we should focus? So what should our focus be? What should our priority be? Once again, I'm forcing you to choose only one of these. Is it product messaging as priority? This is Pharma's role. Our role is to produce products and distribute them. Is it that we should be inspiring our HCPs, showing them what is going to be possible going forward? Is it about education first, supporting the HCP's understanding of disease? And by the way, you could also replace the word HCP with patient in some of these instances as well. Insightful is supporting HCP understanding of patient needs. So it's about revealing perhaps statistics, metrics, emotional responses that the HCP may not be aware of. Or finally, is it really impossible to say which of these do we need to be adaptable, perhaps personalized is another way of saying that, and indeed have options for every single one of these. So interested to hear your responses to this. I'll hold it open for 3 more seconds. 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Okay, and here are the results of this one. So nearly 2/5 of you say the bottom option, which is adaptable. So I hope that's because you genuinely do believe that adaptation is possible and not just because you couldn't choose between any of the other options. But interestingly, only 3% still say that product messaging is the priority. And we obviously have varying degrees in there. Inspiration, the title of our webinar today, is only a mere 11%. So education and insight is perhaps the priority there, but of course we can have a mixture of all three. So comments on both this and the previous graph, which I can show again if you've forgotten what it looks like, but I'd love to hear what our panel think.
Hi, it's Kumran here. May I take this question actually on focus? It's quite interesting the way people have responded, which I totally agree. It's a combination of everything. But if I have to focus primarily on the product messaging itself as being a priority, that should also be one of our key priorities, because the messaging that we give to our healthcare professionals should be absolutely clear and straightforward. This will aid appropriate use of medication. That's what I believe. What we found through clinical trial programs and structured research programs, we have that sort of succinct approach in getting those messages out, and that messages will have to resonate that sits with the intervention itself, thereby benefiting the patients. So that's how I see this.
Yeah, it's an interesting debate because if you look, I agree, at the end we will talk about the product because it is a carrier of a solution, but I think, like it is said here, the way we do it, I think first of all, and also based on previous discussion, we need to get to the right insights. What is the patient looking for? What is the HCP looking for? Who do we have in front of us? That's the adaptability. Every approach should be personalized. Where do we need to educate and inspire? And at the end, for me, and that's the change that we as an industry have to make, is the product is a carrier of a solution, nothing more and nothing less. And it's about creating an experience, maybe even more than the product itself. So I think the shift away from only on the product focus is correct for me. And so I'm happy to see this reflected in the survey outcome.
Anyone else care to comment on that, or of course the previous? Maybe I'll show the previous one very quickly. So let me just get that back up on the screen. Hold on 2 seconds.
While you're doing that, Paul, I'll give some comment from the QStream side, what our experience is with our customers. So it's interesting, insightful, and education. Those are the two things that our pharma customers are telling us are important from a point of view of how we train and reinforce knowledge for the MSLs and the HCPs. We had a tangible example of this 2 years ago when one of our big global customers came to us and said, look, the problem we have with our sales reps is that their doctor office visits are falling precipitously. And when we researched with the doctors why this was happening, the doctors said, well, it's because your sales reps are still focused on the old transactional model of just pushing drugs. We need them to come into us and have value-added conversation. By that, we mean, tell us something about the therapeutic area. Tell us how your drug impacts the patients. Tell us what the side effects are. Tell us how all of that compares with the other drugs out there in the market. So our customers asked us, can you help our sales rep to transition to that? So we set up a number of Q streams that focused on upskilling the sales reps on their what we call hard skills, their knowledge around the product, their knowledge around the therapeutic areas, their knowledge around the disease areas. And within about 6 months of running these, the feedback we got from our customers is that the doctors were more open to seeing the sales reps again, and the feedback was that the behavior had changed. So I think Heather alluded to this earlier as well. Behavior change here is very, very important from a point of view of how you deal with the HCPs today, whether it's the MSLs or the sales reps. The behavior change is a critical part of that.
Can I add to that as well? And this goes to Helena's point about ownership of it. So in your example, the sales calls were falling off, they weren't sort of more holistically solving, the customer issues, where you could have solved that in a number of ways. So train the sales reps, yes, absolutely, give them more to say and give a holistic experience, but there also could be a willingness of when does that sales rep triage the question to solve that question or solve that problem or bring that problem into the office. Maybe we can be more creative about who we're deploying, or even be brave enough to strip away the arbitrary role distinctions and just simply focus on who's the right skill set in the organization to then deploy to answer the question, so that it's like a company-facing interaction and not necessarily a sales-facing interaction. So we don't necessarily need the sales people to feel that absolute ownership and that they have to solve the problem, but that if we're looking bigger, when's the right time we train anyone who sees customers to reach out and get the right person to solve their problem.
Exactly. And if I might add to that one, Heather, it's also about what need are we talking about? We are still talking about as if the need from the HCP perspective would be a product, a pill, or an ointment, whatever. But I mean, I have experienced many cases where really good reps or key account managers have tried to identify how can we make sure that the right patients are directed to your clinic, your department, and making sure that patients that shouldn't be there or should be diagnosed somewhere else or not referred to this specialist clinic. How can we make sure that that is not happening? Making the HCP need. Sorry, now I'm a little bit ahead of myself. It is about making sure that we are addressing the right need. The need for the HCP perspective might actually be that I'm so overwhelmed, I'm so overworked, I have so many patients that shouldn't be here, that should go to a GP or some other specialist. So I can't even take in anything what you're saying about a product, because that is not my need. So I think what we need to do as a company is to see what is the root cause. When are the HCPs really ready to listen?
Yeah, and finding that out comes from a curiosity culture of everyone in the company to find out what the root cause is. Because if the outcome is the right patient at the right time and the right treatment, it may not be that doctor at that point in time. And we have to look at a systemic view, you know, of their universe. And I'm not sure we're collecting that holistic information right now, or being as curious as we could be to find that out in the first place, let alone deploy the right person to help them.
And also have that willingness that even though the solution or part of the solution might not sit with me, that I transfer that information further on in the organization. So somebody else, it might be medical, but might also be the IT department or something else, that they chip in. So I feel that kind of ownership of getting a solution in place.
And then the access to that information can get to anybody. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Sorry, I have to break it up. Just 1 second. That's all really helpful. But we've only got a few minutes left, and I really want to make sure we cover one more topic before we finish. And that topic is a very important one. I think in the first survey, a lot of people chose incentives and KPIs as a reason why we haven't got more, better understanding of our customers. But it's really measurement and how we actually assessing whether or not we're doing this and actually making progress. How are we actually ensuring that we're not just measuring inputs and measuring the right kind of outputs and actually effects that ultimately filter down to the patient. So just very quickly, let's do one more final audience question. I think you all know the way at which this works now. So which of the following do you regularly engage in to measure customer knowledge or perceptions? But notice that you can choose more than one answer this time. I know I'm being nice as we finish. So please do choose which of these you actually use regularly. Notice the word there. So attitudes and perception research or surveys, assess knowledge before and after education and promotions, looking at clinical behavior changes over time, looking at treated patients, i.e. what the clinician is actually doing with their patients and whether or not that is having an effect on those patients over time, or finally, looking at whether or not HCPs are willing to publicly advocate your solutions. So I guess that kind of alludes to NPS a little bit, that final one, which I know a couple of audience members have asked me about while we've been carrying on here. So I can see we've got about 40% of votes. So let me get the last few stragglers in, and then I will open the conversation up for a final comment on measurement. So 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much, everyone. And obviously these percentages are going to be higher this time because I let everybody choose more than one. But once again, very even. And you can see that it's pretty much, well, 37 the lowest, 54 the highest. So everyone's within that. So basically, you know, nearly a half of people are doing everything here. I'm personally interested to see that 40% of people chose the looking at treated patients. So we're actually going to that level of depth. And I imagine a couple of you might be interested to hear that that is happening, and obviously feeling, I personally feel very emboldened by the fact that that's happening. How about you guys?
Hi, it's Kumran here. This doesn't surprise me at all. So if you look at that 40%, right, looking at treated patients or looking at outcomes, etc., that is quite possible when you are looking at some sort of real-world evidence. If that is what you're looking for, then of course we look for patient outcomes over a period of time, and also the combination of these sort of measures entirely depend on the situation. If you're talking about, if you're running an educational program for healthcare professionals, then you assess the knowledge or if you're talking about a pre-launch activity or a launch phase or whatever, then you talk about or you assess the attitudes and the perception, the share of voice, so on and so forth. So it's entirely dependent on what situation we are in.
Kumran, let me just interrupt you there because we're running out of time. Would you say that RWE is a robust measure of patient impact or patient outcomes? Because I think it could be argued that it isn't always.
Yes and no. The days have gone with where we would just be enough to have an RCT, a robust RCT. Now we are in the era of RCT plus. Right, we have to demonstrate value of the interventions that we are offering, the solutions that we are offering. In that case, the real-world evidence come in as one of the key tools in the armamentarium.
Okay, a final comment from the others, if that's okay, as we're running out of time.
I think the methodology of looking at treated patient outcomes over time can vary in the depth that you're accomplishing this. And to give you an idea of like a big study, or you can easily look at, say, patient charts and a change of a single physician who's been exposed to an educational intervention and look at how he's treating his patients, with a chart review, which is a much lower burden way of looking at an impact or an outcome-based impact of a pharma intervention. So I think it's a broad, layered approach to how you can value those real-world evidence impact measurements and how easily you can attribute them to a pharma-related intervention. I think you have to consider what one may or may not equal another.
Okay, final comment from Dirk or Helena? And of course, Michael.
I would say the boring, I agree, but still valid.
Well, at least it's short, so it's appreciated. Thank you. Dirk, Michael?
The only point I wanted to add and highlight is, okay, when you look at the result of the last question, is how do we get to that? And okay, Kumran mentioned real evidence data or real world evidence data, but I also think exactly third party questionnaires at patient level and at the HCP level is critical for me to see how well we are doing what we think we are doing well. So to objectivize it.
Michael, final word from you?
No, I agree with everything that everybody has said so far.
Excellent. Okay, well, there's a big agreement there at the end, so somehow it feels like we've managed to gain some kind of resolution. Okay, we're at the end of our time. I obviously want to say a huge thank you to the, certainly 5 of the people that you see in front of you right now, Heather, Dirk, Elena, Michael, and Kumran. A particular thanks to Michael, because him and QStream have been instrumental in making sure that today's event was actually able to take place, and of course that we had such a good audience for it. So huge thanks, and some really interesting data and findings there from the polls that we had time to run. So thank you so much for all of that. Obviously, this is sorry, I've got some interesting extra slides here that I didn't intend to show, but I wanted to show this one at least, that it feels like it's a long way away, Barcelona 2020, and it probably is, but it's an event that we're, believe it or not, working on already, and Michael mentioned at the beginning that it's a good place to come along. So I just want to make sure you've got those dates in your calendar. There's a lot of companies now that are replacing their own internal innovation events with coming to Barcelona and bringing along groups, and of course, if that is of interest to you, we can organize a lot of things around the event. So if you're keen on that, then please do come along and make sure that you've signed up to get the information about the speakers and brochure as soon as it's available by going to the website that you can see on your screen. Once again, huge thanks to all of our panelists. You've been incredibly good. Today I'm getting lots of thank you messages from the Q&A already. If you've got any suggestions for us or requests for us, then please do put those in. I'll hold that open for a couple more minutes once we've ended the webinar for you to write in and suggest where we can go next. Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day, and obviously hope to talk to you all again very soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks and goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.